Hello, Jim Howard here in Fort Worth, Texas. It's a rainy morning here. It's 8:20 a.m., October 28th of 2022. It's Friday morning. My arthritis is really hurting me today. I just took a naproxen for that. Funny, yesterday I mentioned, that I really was having a good day. I didn't mention it in a YouTube video, but, that I was having a really good day, and today the pain is extra. I mean, it's extra bad. I'm not sure why. I think things are really, well, I think we all think things are really getting bad in the United States and getting worse every day. Some right-wing people, what was the female governor of they launched a right-wing group, launched a group of people to attack and kidnap, and I'm not sure if it was kill, the Democratic governor of the state, for political reasons. And now, of course, we don't know the details, but it just popped up on the news that someone attacked the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi. Someone attacked her husband. It just happens so there's not much news. I think this is the only news here. Paul Pelosi, the husband of House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, was attacked at the couple's home in San Francisco early Friday morning. The Democratic Speaker's office said in a statement, he is expected to make a full recovery. The assailant is in custody and a motive is being investigated. The Speaker was in Washington at the time of the attack. So it's just really, it's really out of control. And I've talked about it in past videos, just because it was on my mind or something, that things have really, really gotten out of control and gotten bad, and something needs to be done about the situation. I'm not sure what you can do when you have about half of the people in the United States, when you have about half of the voters, in the country who are in serious need of education and probably medication, and there's a lot of reasons, for these. I mean, you just can't, and I'm afraid that a bunch of them, if you try to solve these problems, you get into a situation of it looks like you're trying to violate their rights of freedom of speech and that type of stuff. And you've got talk radio, which for a long time, right-wing talk radio, I think there's more than one, but there's like an application. I ran a little bit of video one time. I recorded it, I think like it was on a Sunday morning or something like that, and I went to with the map, just clicked on local radio stations, and every local radio station has at least one. Of course, if it's a bigger community, but they have that like some of them are all day long, AM radio stations that are right-wing conspiracy stuff, and that's just the way it is, and you've just got stuff on the internet that people go for. I've mentioned this before several times, I'm sure. Back when I had my computer bulletin board system starting in 1982, and it was one of the first around. Actually, for Kansas City, Missouri, when I started, there were two. One was the Commodore Users Group bulletin board system, and they just had software that you could download, and I don't think they hardly even had a message board. I'm sure they must have had a message board there someplace, but it was just, and it was in a basement or something, I understand, and just ran without attention. It just ran for a long time. And the other was Form 80 bulletin board system, and it was Radio Shack software for the Radio Shack computers, which I was running, but I couldn't afford a hard drive, and so I had to use a tape recorder, whatever. But it was run by the guy who wrote Form 80. Yeah, that was it. The BBS program. So it just happened in Kansas City, Missouri, where I lived. The guy who wrote, I couldn't use his software. I had to write my own in BASIC. But so that was the two, and then mine was the third one to start up. But the guy who did the Form 80, I mean, he wrote a great program. Like I said, I couldn't use it. But he was an SOB. And since there was only the Commodore, there was no point in me going to the Commodore site really. And so really wasn't, any place for me to really go for a while. And then of course everybody started, having computer bulletin board systems. But I would log in, not just me, but I would log in and he would jump into chat or something or other. Maybe he didn't do it a whole bunch of times, but he did it a couple times at least. He jumped in, I don't know, it's been many, many years, but I think he basically, I remember one time I logged in, he was working on his software all the time, and then of course it ran, and so he was always working on it. Well, I think all of us were always working on our, on our software. But anyway, I logged in, and he had made a change to, well, I didn't notice the change really, but I'm typing a message or something to somebody, and he jumps into chat, and I forget what he said, what in the hell is wrong with you, you idiot, or whatever. And I said, well, what's wrong? Did I do something wrong? Yes. He says, I've worked on the message software, and they're not supposed to hit a carriage return, enter at the end of the line. Just keep typing, it wraps around. And I said, I'm sorry, I didn't know that. And then there was a few other times, not just me, he was, and it actually worked out good for me because I made up my mind, I don't want to be like this guy. And there was a whole bunch of other people, not that bad, not as bad as him, but there was other people who were system operators of their bulletin board system, and they had attitudes, and I positively didn't. And you know, I went a different direction, and it worked out. It made I felt better, and even after the bulletin boards, even after I moved to the World Wide Web, there in the beginning, I ran into people in Kansas City, Missouri, and they would, oh wow, when I was, you know, when I was in high school or whatever, you know, for Christmas I got a modem, and you were the first bulletin board system that, and you talked to me and you answered my questions, and so that worked out, made me feel good, and but and then there was a guy, Dave Hallis, later on, he had a computer bulletin board because of, you know, me. But man, he was really smart. He was stuttered really bad, and he worked at a hospital in the food service department or something, and but he picked up on computer stuff really fast. And let's see, what was it called? Oh man, bulletin board system. I can't remember the name of it. I should. Free Thought, was that it? And so I learned a lot. I learned a lot from him, and he, you know, he was in food service at the hospital, and then this is in the early days of computers. He learned about computers, not by going to any classes or schools or anything. And then before long, he was like the go-to person in food service and dietary and what have you, and for the computer situation, you know. And then I think it was like he was, for the hospital, I think, the whole hospital, he became a key man. I'm not sure exactly, you know, he wasn't in charge, I don't think, of telecommunications or anything like that, but he was really good at everything. And then a cardiology group of heart doctors, he became their computer person, and he ran the thing, and they even did some research, a whole bunch of research on some subject, and produced a thing that, you know, I'm not sure if it was the New England Journal of Medicine or what, but they published, you know, it was a peer group type thing or whatever, and they, you know, that was published by them. They had the three, I think it was three cardiologists names on the, you know, on the thing, and then they had his name. He wasn't a doctor, you know. They had his name down there as like number 3, you know, the 3 doctors, and then for what he did, his work that he did. And then he also, TBBS was real popular there for a while, for software. And he used it for a while, and then I don't think he sold it to me. I think he gave it to me. Maybe I paid him a little bit for it or something. Can't remember now, a long time. But he gave it to me, and then I was running it. And then in Kansas City, Missouri, the county or city, I guess, maybe combined, used to be General Hospital, and then it became Truman Medical Center. And 2 or 3 doctors, I know it was at least 2, they contacted me because they saw me running TBBS software, and they liked the looks of it and everything. And so they came out and to the trailer that I lived in and saw the software and talked to me about, setting it up for I'm not sure if it was, I think it was Truman Medical Center then, I'm not sure. But so that the hospital would have a bulletin board system, a way that people could log in and do things. Anyway, I sold it to them at a very low price, and they came out and picked it up and took it and hooked it up, and so. But from Dave Hallis, I learned some things, the way he did things, like message boards that were on. I had message board, of course, message boards and stuff like that. But he set some things up, like on subject. Like there'd be one of the message boards would be on some subject, and so I copied his idea. Probably everybody was probably doing that sort of a thing. That's just sort of the way that the system, that things worked. So I set up. I'm not sure if I set up a whole bunch of the ones that he had. Well, there wasn't that many. But so the message boards were, general messages, private messages, and different. There would be like things on gaming, things on all this kind of stuff. But so I had message boards on, 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 or something like that. Then there was ones that I pulled in through the internet. Well, through the through the internet, that were through the internet, and then some other bulletin board systems, 2 or 3. We did that together, pulled it in through, and at that time, the internet was supposed to be used by universities and the military. And so after a while they saw, of course, the other bulletin board systems in Kansas City that we were, joining together to do that. They also had, their own domain name. And it didn't end in .gov or .university or whatever they use, And I think mine was, I forget, Howard.net or something like that. And apparently not just, me, but I guess some university people and maybe some military people or governmental people, but probably university people. They saw that, and that it's like, who in the hell is Howard, he's pulling in these message boards and stuff like that. So anyway, we got kicked off because that was supposed to be, kicked off of. So we had to I made other arrangements. I'm sure the other guys made other arrangements too. There was some computer company, or it wasn't a company, in Iowa, I think, or something like that, and they were pulling in internet stuff. And so, now remember, well, there really wasn't any World Wide Web, and I was pulling in messages, over the phone line, and that was really expensive back then. The Southwestern Bell, man, calls within the state, and you're within your local state that you were in, where, you know, you had to, it was an arm and a leg to pay for them. And so, you know, systops, people running computer bulletin boards, you'd set up your system to call at night when the rates were down a little bit, and some of us even hooked together. And like in the phone book, when you open the phone book up, you know, in the front you could see, okay, if you're in this area code, you know, zip, you know, area code or whatever, you can call these other communities around here, and they'd show a map or whatever. You can call them for free, not just your local exchange, but these others also. So my computer was set up with a couple phone lines, you know, and so other systops could call in and connect with mine without, you know, from their area without having to pay. And then they could dial out through my system into the ones that I could talk to for free, and I could dial in, and you know, and then there was more connected together. It was just crazy. You had to do it. Finally the government stepped in and broke up, which didn't, you know, it helped them, you know, broke up the big phone company, because the phone company wouldn't allow you to hook up an extension. It was against the law, I guess tariff or something. I don't know how it could be against the law, but you know, you couldn't hook up an extension phone. You couldn't do anything. It was, you know, so they broke up the telephone companies into separate corporations, which each one of those then became, you know, like the Southwestern Bell or whatever they were. You know, they got broken up into, I forget what the others were. And then there was the breaking away of the telephone. They had they manufactured the telephones, and I think it was against the law to manufacture, you know, telephones. So anyway, I set up these message boards, and that's what I was getting at. So and my bulletin board system was open to everybody. I don't care what kind of computer you were using, you know, that you purchased, whether it was a Commodore or a TI, Texas Instrument, or any of the others. I didn't care. Now, some of the systops, they'd kick you off if you weren't using what they were using. But I set up these message boards on. Anyway, I was able to do it. You're probably going to say, if you're one of these right-wing conspiracy people, and then some also in the other side, you'd say, well, no, I couldn't do it. But whatever the subject was, abortion, all the ones that are still current, you know, abortion, and all these other subjects, I set up, and I put the right side, you know, the conservative point of view on gun control. I mean, all these subjects, you know, gun control, and then the other side, you know, both sides. I presented both sides freely. I didn't play any games. Didn't do like Fox News does, you know. Did and still does. I remember what Obama was making a State of the Union address to the nation. Once a year, the president makes a State of the Union address to Congress, a joint session of Congress. The House is there, you know, and the Senate is there. And in fact, Supreme Court shows up, military, you know, leaders sit there and all this kind of stuff. And Fox News, they just did, you know, it was just stuff that wasn't done before. The President of the United States addressing the nation, you know, and whatever. And Fox News, they're the thing, what do they call those for TV stations and stuff? They have a bottom banner, the ticker tape that runs it. I hate that. Not having anything to do with politics, but you'll be watching a school shooting or watching something, and no matter what it is, you know, the network will have their logo or whatever, like 1/4 at the bottom, Sometimes you'll be watching something and it'll be covered, the car crash, whatever it is, it'll be covered by their thing. Why, oh sure, put it up for a while or make it super, super small. That reminds me. Make it super, super small or something, but don't cover up. But anyway, I was watching the State of the Union address, and I switched over to Fox News, because that's another thing that I used to, I don't anymore, but I would go to, what was the one, redstate.com, a right-wing conservative spot. And I would go there just about every day, and I would check and see what their point of view was on something. And the same with Fox News. I would go and check and see what's their position. Anyway, I was watching the State of the Union, President of the United States, speaking, and Fox News has, down at the bottom part, is President Obama a communist? They had a lot of that was just there all the time, Maybe they changed it a little bit but I thought, man, that is really, of course, it's gone much further. I mean, it's just gotten worse, steadily worse. Fox News is, one of them that is responsible for that type of thing. It became, like I was working at a hospital, and we were all like small hospital. I worked there 9 years. Worked hospital security 30 years, but at that hospital I worked 9 years out of my small town that I lived in, and we were all like family. But it became political there too a little bit, because I'd go in and I've always been interested in news, politics, even as a kid. I'd skip school, be watching the Kefauver hearings and that type of stuff. But anyway, when I had the computer bulletin board system, I set up these things, and what I noticed was, there was these things. Nobody ever changed their mind. People who were, pro-guns, they never changed their mind. The people that were abortion or whatever, they never changed their mind. Every one of the issues, and we still have all those issues, I think, they never changed their mind. Well, I take that back. I did set up one message board about hamburgers, and some people did, and maybe I did about that, because people were, dialing in, with their modems, and some of them were saying White Castles. No, they're the best. We didn't have a White Castles, and then eventually one opened up, and then people in Kansas City, some of them, yeah, White Castles, they changed their mind from which, that's the only one, not on, national health care, not on abortion, gun rights, or anything else. Nobody changed their mind. But and when the World Wide Web was invented, many years later, and then I moved, of course, to the World Wide Web. I'm sure I didn't, but I looked on the World Wide Web once it was, set up, and I was sending out streaming video, and I was sending out streaming video of myself, and people were, the only streaming video that I ever found before I, was doing it, was there was a camera at some business that was aimed at a vending machine, coffee or Coke machine or something, and there was a camera aimed at a place where in a business where they had their coffee thing set up, and no people. Well, I mean, you might see somebody walk up but then I was streaming 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, video. And people would log in. In the beginning, people would log in and go to chat, and they'd say, this is a video. No, and I know, I'm live, I'm streaming live. No, you're not. And then they'd say, hold up 2 fingers, And they'd ask me something else, and then, wow, a real human, But I doubt, I don't claim that I was the first person, because that never works. No matter what there's going to be somebody else, other people, someplace else doing the same thing. But when I moved to the World Wide Web and set up, using, well, I forget, I went through a whole bunch of the different message type thing, diary type thing, that type of thing. And when I got around to using WordPress, that was one of further down the line. I used that for years. But anyway, when I first started that, I said, there's no, this is Howard's notebook, and no reason for me to put, different views or whatever. You'll just see what my views are, and of course then you'll go to these other places and you'll see what their views, are. And what I found out was nobody went to the others. Well, I think liberal people like myself, I think a lot of them were doing the same thing I was doing. Not as much, but going to CNN and then going to Fox News and that type of thing. But it became the right-wing conservative, and then they put out total garbage and lies, and it just has progressively gotten worse. But I thought that people would, well, working too at that small hospital, we all liked each other and worked well together and that type of stuff. But I wouldn't be thinking of, like politics. I saw something, what was it? I'm trying to think of this one guy. There was one guy that worked there, respiratory therapy guy. And he was kind of a weird guy. But he was into, at that point, Apple computers, and I was into PCs. And he was kind of like a crotchety old man. He wanted to be left alone. And the nurses were like afraid when they needed to call him or something to do I think it might have been blood gases he had to draw. That was respiratory therapy's job too at night or whatever. I think that was it. Anyway, the nurse would be, oh God, I got to call him, and he's, he doesn't. And so sometimes the nurse would do whatever. Maybe it was EKGs. Sometimes the nurse would do it rather than call Roger. But Roger and I, because of the computer interest, and we became good friends. And then I got him, and I was able to, I didn't set out to do it, but, he would come down to the emergency room or whatever, and the nurses would be, oh my God, don't, and like his name was Roger, and so he came down and I was there, and he came around the corner and I said, Roger Dodger, here's Roger, and the nurses, oh, don't say that, he'll be mad, and then of course he wasn't. Before long, then I was, hey, Roger, come on in, and because they had nurses had a area there with, coffee machine and that type of thing. Before long, he was eating with us and all that type of stuff. Eventually, after working at, I didn't know it. He actually started coming over to my house, trailer, maybe once a month, maybe every other month or something. He'd come over and we'd talk for hours. I'd order pizza in, and we'd talk about computers, and talked a little bit about, politics and stuff. He was the, I had, heard of digital cameras, when they first came out, and because I was always into photography or whatever. But he came over for one of our, conversations and stuff. He came over and he had one, and I think they were like $3,000 or something like that. And that's the first time I held a digital camera. Like, wow. But he was kind of weird because I think I might have mentioned this. I told somebody, maybe I was telling the ex-wife or something about it. I forget. Maybe I told it on it here someplace. That anyway, we were talking like politics, and I think I sort of thought that, like my father and I, we would talk, and we'd have sometimes different, well, a lot of times, just to have different opinions, and we never said any, but there was a lot of times we'd be, I'd have some position, and he'd have the opposing position, and then he or I would just switch, and we'd be doing, like a debate thing or whatever. And I sort of thought, that, hey, that's the way, because he had these right-wing things, and we sort of debated a little bit, and I couldn't believe. Finally, it dawned on me, I must be really dumb. Finally, and I forget what it was. I think it might have been a scientific, medical story came out that was probably on CNN. But at that point I was, I'd watch CNN and I'd switch. I remember during the Iraq invasion, I was watching, as our troops were moving in and everything, I was watching CNN, but I would switch over to Fox News occasionally to see what they had. And when I switched over, I was kind of surprised because their unit news was ahead, was out getting places closer than the CNN people were. And redstate.com, by the way, is another site I used to go to. It was a right-wing conservative site, but I would, in the beginning, the guy it was his site, really. I mean, it wasn't a bulletin board system, but it was his thing. There was some sanity to him, and he took some positions, that were, interesting. But then later it got taken over by another, he got bought out or whatever, got taken over by another group, and they were really right-wing. And then it got taken over by another group, and after that there was no point in going there because it was totally like redstate.com. I wonder, hang on a second. I'm sure they're still around, but it became totally it got taken over by a group and it became totally, there was no point in going there. Yeah, here it is. And they've improved the look of it a lot. I haven't looked in a whole long time. I mean, with these pictures and that type of, but I mean, I haven't had time. I haven't checked it in a long time, but anyway, Roger. Oh, we go here. I think I went into work, and I had seen this scientific study that came out. It probably was on CNN because at that point I was not watching Fox News at all. There was no point in going there. I mean, people, when they lie, and when they distort and whatever, it's just, you know. And then when the scientific study came out, okay, scientific, if you're right wing, you know, you don't believe in science. But so anyway, but a study came out, and I watched it wherever I watched it. I think it might have been on the McNeil-Lear report, or maybe it was after that, you know, news hour. And so the doctors and the scientists, they talked about, you know, that some people are born gay. And they talked about the percentage, you know, some people are born gay. A very few, small number of people are, you know, converted to be, you know, to be gay. That wasn't, I forget the number, it wasn't a very high number. Where the right wing, where the religious people, conservative religious people, after all of them voting for Donald Trump, I can't hardly think of, and if you check back on go back and even look at the YouTube videos, you'll go back and you'll see a few years back that I talk about these conservative, you know, religious people, and that I don't agree with their politics, and that I don't think that religious organizations should be, you know, preaching from the pulpit to the people. And if they want to, they need to do what the law is and pay taxes, but none of them do. And any politician that would come up and say, hey, you know, the Internal Revenue Service and the laws are that in order to be tax-free, you can't be doing political stuff, you know, in your church. I mean, they'd let you get, you know, but anyway, and they talked about a whole bunch of things on this. I think it was probably the news hour. I still watch that every week, not every day. It's 5 days a week, and I don't, you know, I try to catch the Friday show especially. But they mentioned in there things like what they had discovered was that if a woman has a male baby, if she has another male baby, and I'm sure it wouldn't have to be, you know, you could have a female, and then you could have a male, I mean, you could have twins and all that kind of, but when a woman has her first baby is male, she must kick out some type of hormones or something in her system that makes a slight change to, I don't know what, you know, this is science, you know. You know, I flunked high school all 4 years. And so then if she has a boy, and then once she has a boy, another boy, and I'm not sure if it was, but if she has another boy, the percentage, and this is science. Oh God, it's so difficult, you know. Well, of course, I think I have very few right-wing people coming here. They'd be welcome, but they'd have to put up with me saying, you know, Trump is stupid. Yeah, so if you can't put up with that, and they don't, you know, so they leave, that's fine. But anyway, that I'm not sure if it was just the next boy or if it was, you know, that were born, they had a much higher percentage chance of being gay also. But anyway, I forget the details of this thing, but I thought it was, there again, I'm not smart, but anyway, I thought this is really, you know, very interesting, because I knew I worked with well, several people at that hospital that I worked at, were born-again Christians. They don't like Halloween, because, that's been getting kids to think about witchcraft, and they probably don't like black cats, Catholic Church didn't kill all the black cats. I think they just about killed all the cats, but they didn't, But anyway, so I knew. But anyway, so Roger was there, and I said, "Oh, Roger, I just saw this thing on the news. It's really interesting, or whatever." No, we were at home. That was right. At my place, he came over to visit or whatever, and that's where I brought it up. Because I wouldn't have talked that much about politics. We wouldn't have talked that much about work, But anyway, I said, "Oh, there was this thing on about such and now he was smart. Roger was. He had, I know he had a bachelor's degree, and he had some other, or not. I don't think he finished the others, but he took computer, classes, a whole bunch of stuff like that. I told him you ought to, I said, quit respiratory therapy and go to at some. And he said, "Oh no, I wouldn't." I said, "Yeah, you would." I said, because he took a whole bunch of computer classes. I said, even if it's less money than respiratory therapy, go to work with some little, computer company. Go in there. I said, sweep the floors, and you'll be sweeping the floors, and you'll hear these, technicians or whatever, computer guys will be saying, I don't know, I think the stack should be wide of the 12th or something, and you'd say, excuse me, and you'd say something, and they'd, hey, yeah, you're right, stuff like. I said, before long, you'd be running the place, which I think he would have, but he was afraid to quit, to change jobs. But anyway, I think that was his thing, when he said, when I told him, hey, there's a scientific study done and blah, 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 blah. And he said, oh, that's not right. And I, what do you mean? He said, oh, I forget what he said exactly. And I said, wait a minute, you think that nobody is born gay? They are converted, that there are other gays out there converting these people over into their, like vegetarians or Jehovah's Witnesses or something. Yeah, and I said, oh, no. I said, there's definitely some people that are born gay, No. And then that's when I realized what I thought was just some discussion going on subjects. He was, definitely right wing, way far right wing. Oh, being weird. I liked him, by the way. I'm not putting him down. I'm just saying he's weird, Well, I told you, he brought over that digital camera. Man, wow, I was like, I got to get me one of those, but I couldn't afford it at that price, Now, he was a lot different than I, too, with, well, eventually he switched to IBM, to PC computers, because Apple did something. He invested a lot of money in whatever model it was, and as they upgraded, he would upgrade. And then they went to, and I forget which it was, and pissed a lot of people. They lost a lot of people. They just switched to a new Apple computer, and your stuff that the old Apple computer you had, that was, it wasn't supported at all, and that was it. He switched to PC computer. That just popped in my mind, another difference was, I would, well, my closet is filled with computer stuff. I buy something, and if it doesn't work, you know, I mean, some stuff I send back. I mean, some, but a lot of stuff I just, you know, but I don't, you know, I try it. If it doesn't work, he would spend a year or longer. He would find, you know, some little tiny was software or some kind of hardware, and he would figure out what the problem was. The manufacturer didn't know, you know, the seller didn't know, and he would come up with what the problem was, and he would fix it for himself. And I was telling him then, you should be doing a bulletin board system, you know, or a, you know, beyond the, if the web had been in, or the web was invented, but, and now he would, I said, okay, you know, because he was privacy or whatever. Okay, well, you don't have to, you know, do video. You don't even have to show your picture. Just explain what you what you discovered and how you discovered it. But he, you know, he wouldn't do that. And to show you how he was, well, after, you know, like, I'm not sure which came first, but he showed me, you know, a digital camera. Wow, you know, this is great, because I was into photography since I was in grade school. And I didn't like color. I like to do everything in black. That was a mistake. I'm going to have to get me a, okay, hang on a second. This time I'm going to bring up the, oh, I'm already there. One time I had 2 or 3 cameras going, and had a little tiny up in one corner, you know, the camera, but it was small, round, you know, up there, and anyway, I walked over from here to get something. I thought I switched away from the camera, you know, but I forgot that there was a little camera up in the corner. I got to get me a Coke. I'm back. Anyway, I went then to get something, and so in the little tiny, you know, little tiny cup in a corner, you can see the little bit of the, I had my t-shirt on but no pants, you know. You could see the crack of my ass a little bit, you know. Even if it had been my bare butt, it wouldn't have, you know, shouldn't have mattered. And so, and when I came back, it was like, oh, damn. And then I thought about just deleting the video, but I didn't want to waste the video. So somebody, and I forget his name, and I think he's correct, and he showed a class too, by the way. Oh, you know, anyway, Facebook banned me, which I've mentioned before, and it's the truth. I'm glad. I hated Facebook, and I tried to go through all the steps to get yourself off of it, so you weren't, you know, and I couldn't. That wouldn't work. So anyway, they banned me for content or something, and I thought, what content? I thought the only thing I could figure was that a bunch of right-wing Trump supporters, because they, not just because of me, but they've set up groups, you know, they've gotten together, and they are hammering they're hammering YouTube and Facebook and all these places, picking somebody that's, you know, that's not a Trump supporter and accusing them of stuff or whatever. And I thought that, I mentioned in my video, you know, that when I reported here that I'd been banned, I said, I can't believe it, you know, that, you know, that because that they would do that, but I thought that, I said, you know, that would have to be what it was, because I haven't done anything other than tell you the truth that Trump is really stupid and, as far as I'm concerned, guilty of treason against the United States of America. Anyway, this guy he showed some class by, I didn't, you know, I don't care, you know, about stuff like that. But he sent me a private message. He says, Jim, maybe the reason in your video where you got up, you know, and showed the crack of your ass or whatever, maybe that's it. And I think that probably was it. But probably, I don't think Facebook would have cared for, you know, I mean, it was not, you know, like stripping and running at the Olympics or something, running or something, you know, or out onto a baseball field or something like that. But it may be that a whole bunch of, you know, somebody spotted it. And, I mean, most people, you know, don't pay that much attention, I don't think. But it may be that, like, one person, you know, right-winger saw that and then logged into whichever group, whatever software they're using. Hey, here's something you can hit on, and here's the clip, you know, the clip or something. And I think that may be it. So anyway. Oh, okay. Back to, this is going to be about an hour here in a minute, so I'll want to, anyway, after Roger had come over and shown me his, you know, digital camera, he came over and I said, you have got to see this. It's, what was it? Google Earth? Google Maps? What was it? Where you could see, you know, I said, look at this, and I entered my address, you know, and then the map, and you can see the trailer that I lived in, you know, on C Street, and I moved over, and there's the hospital that I worked at there, you know, the parking lot and stuff. I said, this is amazing. So we talked a little bit, yeah, this is amazing, you know. And I said, Roger, give me your address and I'll put your address in. No. And I said, no, just give me your address and I'll, no. I said, you won't put your, nope. Years later, by the way, I was doing the 2000s. I didn't get him, that would have been neat. But I did the 2000 census. And I had that area, but I didn't have his. Anyway, I was walking down because I just did. Actually, what was happening, I didn't know it in the beginning when I was doing the 2000 census, because in the beginning I told a bunch of people, okay, you're all, and well, that year, for that census that's when we had the short form, like you normally have, and the long form, and that was terrible. Like I think one out of every 15 or 20 people we had to do the long form on, and it was it was just terrible. But the people were really, really good. I mean, they were. I had one guy out of all the people that I went to, and I got there, you know, they came to the door, I had my badge on, you know, the census thing on and whatever. Get off my property, don't come back, I'm not doing the census, you don't have any right to ask me any questions or whatever. And I said, well, sir, and then I was, you know, trying to explain to him. And he wouldn't, he just, get off my property, don't come back or whatever. That was the only person. Now there were a few others, very few. I'm thinking maybe less than 10 who, here in the United States, every 10 years, the Constitution of the United States. In our Constitution, well, UK, you don't even have a Constitution. Although you gave us a Magna Carta, well, didn't give it, we didn't adopt it, completely, but yeah. But there's very little in our Constitution. It was really a fantastic Constitution. I'm sorry, I now think we probably would have been better to stick with your system. But the Constitution doesn't have very much, it left things to be filled out, not rewritten. Well, yeah, there are amendments to it. It's hard to do, but there's how did I get on that subject? I gotta have a sip of Coke. Oh, the guy went to the door on. Oh, anyway, I was just going to try to, our Constitution, it actually it's very minimal about what it, they did the necessary stuff, but an awful lot of people don't. They would not think, oh, you have no right to ask me these questions, or whatever. It's actually in the Constitution of the United States. There will be every 10 years a census done, and I forget exactly the wording, but you will, you have to answer these questions or whatever. And I think probably if you were to ask in some form, the American is, the census that we do every 10 years, they'd say, that's not in the Constitution. It is. It's one of the few things, very few things are in the Constitution, actually. That's one of the things that are there. But anyway, what I was going to try to tell this guy is, but I had to give up. I was going to explain to him what was going to happen. I would report back that, this person refused. They would send another person like me out there, thinking, well, he... And two, what might happen is the person might come back. The guy might, or the man's wife might know, her husband's an asshole, And maybe the census person would come, and maybe, But anyway, they would send another person. Okay, let's say he was still home, Then they would send a supervisor out. And I don't know if after that they would bother to send a different supervisor out or not. But what would then, wanted to explain to him what was going to happen is that they would send out, by the way, census information is extremely confidential. That's a big thing with the census. But anyway, what they would then do is they would go to the neighbors, and let's hope the guy has a, short form. Very few questions, almost, but they'd go to the neighbors. Do you know, how many people live there? Do you know this? They'd ask the neighbors. But anyway, that was the only person. Now there were a few other people that I went to, and well, I don't, they'd say they were not, no problem, well, I'm not sure if I want to do the census or whatever. And then I would just say, oh, okay, why don't we just, it's, I think all of them had the short form, by the way, luckily, thank God, I think. I said, why don't we just work through it? If there's something you don't want to answer, or whatever, I'll try to explain to you why they need the information. And it'll be up to you, of course you can refuse. And so they said, okay. And I think maybe one or two people said, well, I don't know, why do I, And what I actually had done is on C-SPAN here in the United States, I keep forgetting we have people that are not in the United States. C-SPAN is covers the government or whatever, so people make fun of it, but they'll have the cameras running all the time at the House of Representatives, at the Senate, and then they cover other events, political speeches, and they do all this kind of stuff. And one of the things I watched on C-SPAN when I got hired, before I started with, I probably didn't even know if I was going to get hired. But it was a congressional committee, well, one in the House and then one in the Senate. And the committee has Democrats and Republicans on it. The House and the Senate, has, and so their purpose was to ask they had the people who ran the census, and they were asking, okay, why are you asking this question? And then the whoever they were with the Census Bureau or whatever would say, because Congress, you passed legislation that required us to, and then they would give, I can't remember what the examples were, but then they would say, because Congress requires us to give you statistics on, and I forget what it was, I'll just have to sort of make something of it. It could be like how many veterans are in each area. So, so you can decide whether additional money needs to be spent on veterans hospitals or whether, you need to build new ones, and it was always things like that. And anyway, I was out. Everybody except that one guy was really nice. I had no problem with nobody else refused. What I didn't know when I started doing the census was, of course, we had training things, maybe they didn't tell us, I don't know. Maybe deliberately. But I'd go out and then I'd tell people, okay, well, you're done for 10 years. One guy was like 100, I think, on a tractor. I, pulled up and he got off his tractor and came on over. He was 100 years old. And when I got all done and everything, I said, okay, well, you're all done. I'll be back in 10 years to do your census. You young whippersnapper, I'm 100 years old. I won't be around then. I said, oh, no, I think you'll be around. You're out here working at 100 years of age on a farm or whatever. I think you're going to be just fine. I'll see you in 10 years, And then as this went on, with the census, we had to go out in phases. Like phase 1, we went out and we didn't talk to anybody. We made sure the addresses were correct. You put in a new street in or something, like, or these occupied, who's living there and that type of stuff. And phase 2 was, I forget, and then phase 3 was going door to door. And I just did the 2000 census, and I was glad, actually. I felt good. You can find things where I've commented in the past on here about how that made me feel good about America. And I think by the time the 2010 census came around, I would not have wanted to be a census person. And especially now, they just, not a couple of years ago, they completed the 2020 census. Oh my God, the way people are now, I think you'd run into half of the people. I'm not giving the government any information. And they'd be saying, you have no right, do it. I don't have to tell you anything. Actually, the government could fine you, but they wouldn't do it. I mean, that would be so counter, productive. But legally, they could. It's one of the few things, nobody would believe it was in the Constitution. But anyway, with Roger, no. As I was going around doing the census, as it went on longer, what I didn't know, I found out when I had to do it, was, well, as soon as the census started in the inner city of Kansas City, Missouri, there was I believe, a female census worker, and she was, remember, that's when they had, by the way, about every 10 or 15 people, there was a long form to be filled out. I mean, they stopped that. And, the questions were like, do you have a telephone? And I mean, I called on some fancy, I called on Cass County, Cass County, Missouri. There's some poor people like me living in mobile homes or less, and then there were people living in mansions, and you had to ask them, do you have a telephone? Do you have a bathroom? I mean, it was like, oh my God, But anyway, these people that I called on, there were, white families that adopted, foreign kids, adopted black kids, all types of things like that. And everybody was so nice, it made me feel so good about the United States. Unfortunately, here it is later on, and I don't feel good about the United States. And I can't believe how many stupid people we have in the United States and how many prejudiced people we have in the United States. Now, I had to deal with racial prejudice when I worked hospital security. But anyway, I ran into Roger. He was coming out of his, I wasn't going to he wasn't on my list. But he came out and I said, okay, Roger, now I know where you live. I said, I'm sure if I went in there and looked in your freezer, there'd be human heads in there, and he laughed, And then later he actually moved over into Raymore, Missouri, where I was a reserve, police officer. So I'd keep a close eye on his house. Now, he didn't move there so that I don't, But almost an hour and 15 minutes. I need to bring this to a conclusion. I'm sure I started some... Oh, no, wait, I have something else. I don't think I explained that fully. Yeah. Okay, so what I didn't know was, I did all these census, the forms. And the other people were doing them, of course. And I would tell a lot of people, okay, well, you're all done. That wasn't so bad, was it? And you won't see anybody for 10 years. And then I started calling on some people, and they say, well, we already filled it out. And I said, well, I don't have any record that you did. Can we please do it again? And they said, everybody said yes. Some of those people had the long form, I'm sure. But what happened was, okay, I went and, did this. A certain number of the places that I went to and all the other census workers that they went to were pulled and checked and redone again. They didn't just show up and say, oh, did you do the census? Oh yeah, I did the census. Oh, okay, no need, you know, they went through all the questions again. Anyway, there was, we would, you know, the census people we had made every once a week or something like that, maybe every couple of weeks, to find out any new information or different things. And right after the census started, we were informed that there was, in the inner city, a woman who was, you know, working for the Census Bureau, who sat in her, you know, apartment or whatever, and filled the things out at home. She didn't call people. That wouldn't have been, of course, permitted either, you know. But she just sat there and checked boxes or whatever. Of course, they immediately, and of course, that's a crime. I don't know what they did, you know, to her. Probably not much, but so I started running into people, and I found out. Then I also found out, okay, somebody went out and did the census, and then somebody like me, they would have go out and check X number of those, and you know, I would do, you know, we would all, you know, like I would do that, okay. And then I don't know what the number was. They would do a check, you know, on me. Somebody else would go around and check to make sure. God, but I mean, that shows you how. By the way, you know, it says in the Constitution that a census will be done every 10 years, and I forget what the exact wording on it, but you know, by direct contact, you know, not sending something out through the mail or doing anything like that. And so for the 2000 census, which I worked, what the Democrats wanted to do was, because of the tremendous number of people employed and because of gas mileage and all this kind of everything, you know, and just, and two, they figured out, you know, actually doing it the way people do surveys and do stuff, it was much more accurate that way than it was going, you know. But the Republicans thought the Democrats were trying to pull, at least that's what they said, you know, pull some type of a scam on them or something. And so the but of course the Republicans were correct. It's in the Constitution, and it says that it has to be done person to person or whatever. And of course the Democrats said, okay, you know. And it would be expensive because, well, when I had a friend who did the 20, he told me about it, I think, the thing to begin with, the 2000 census. I think he'd done before. And he did the 2010 and I think the 2020, I believe. Because for like the 2010, everybody had, all the census workers had like a palm device or like a cell phone or something, except bigger. And it had to be specially designed. It had to be specially designed. It had to be able to make sure that nobody could access that information. And when they were all done with all these things, they were brand new, you know, designed, you know, issued and all that kind of stuff. And then they had to be destroyed. And that kind of shows you, you know, hey, like Donald Trump just decided he could just take stuff home from the White House and that type of stuff. No, you know. I think, too, what they must have done is, because I didn't run into any trouble, and I didn't hear of anybody running into any trouble. Now, for one of the censuses, it wasn't the 2000 I did, it was one of the others. In the South, a census worker, black, was in Alabama or someplace, Georgia or someplace like that. was found hanging from a tree. And of course, that was investigated big time. And apparently I can't remember all the details of it. He did it himself. He hung himself. And apparently he was trying to, play on the thing of, the lynchings that happened in the, in the South and stuff. And I'm sure probably very few black people believe that, but it was investigated. But oh, I think too, probably because I didn't run into any trouble, and I didn't hear of anybody that ran into any, well, there was a lady, and I think she was in Texas, by the way, a lawyer, and she lived in a big house, walls around it with barbed wire around it and an electronic gate and all that kind of stuff. And I guess the census worker, rang the bell or whatever, and she came down and she shot the census worker. She yelled at him, "You have no right to be, you have no right to be here, or don't touch my gate, and all this kind of stuff." And I'm not sure she killed the census worker, but the news was that she had a lot of she had a lot of psych problems. So, oh, and I too, like on this not giving out any information. They were very strict on that. You could not give out any information, not to the police, not to anybody. That was confidential information. Of course, we all had, an ID, and I think they probably would have put the word out to, police departments. They had a little thing, hey, explaining it. You're going to see these people for the next few months or whatever, and so it never came up. But I could see where, census worker and, I don't think they had any requirement about what kind of car you had to have or whatever. But, you could be pulled up someplace and the police could think you were suspicious, or somebody could call. Although we also had a bag, you had a big thing, Census Bureau or whatever, and you had a bag that, said Census Bureau or something on it. And then there'd been things on the news too about it, but I could see where, because I was actually a reserve police officer at that time, I could see where, you pull up someplace and somebody calls and the police come. So if the police came, you could say, here, I'm a census worker, and whatever. The problem would be, and I think that the police had been, and probably would be smart enough to, if they said, okay, well, you're going in that house there, yeah. And then they'd say, well, who lives there? And then you'd have to say, I can't tell you that. And they might ask you something, I can't. But I don't think there'd be any problem. I think all those things, they probably pretty much, well, there's always going to be a problem. You have a nation of 330 million people, But I didn't hear of any kind of, difficulty. One hospital that I worked at, well, in the inner city, I mean, it was bad. The worst area of Kansas City, Missouri at that time. I know because that was the neighborhood that I grew up in. And one night, when I was working at midnight, I started out day shift, and then when the second shift security officer was shot, I went over and took his place, and then eventually I went to the third shift, and then I went back to days. But when I was working midnight shift, I looked out, on the street and outside or whatever, and saw a car sitting down there on the street. It was on the street, not on the hospital property, but on the street, and suspicious. And it was like 3 o'clock in the morning, so I went out, and then I saw there was 2 guys in it in suits, and I went over, and I forget, right away they knew, the guy pulled out his FBI badge, and I said, oh, okay. He says, we're watching this apartment over here for somebody, and I said, okay. Have a good night. And then I left, Kansas City was kind of, I've made a bunch of videos about, in fact, I think I deleted that, I think. Maybe they're still there. I made some videos about hospital security, and sort of like short little videos of, maybe training, help somebody along. I've had several people say, no, from other locations, well, even the ones in Kansas City probably wouldn't know. I've had people say, no, that's not right, you can't arrest somebody, and you're not you don't have police powers, you don't have this or have that, whatever correcting me on, There was one video I made which was and I explained that it was a joke. And I had several people say, that didn't happen. No, it came, yeah, that was it. Anyway, some guy came in 3 o'clock in the morning or whatever, and he called the nurse, he was drunk, and he called the nurse Ratchet. I saw on the news recently, she just passed away, by the way. The star that played Nurse Ratchet in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, or whatever that was. Anyway, he came in, he called the nurse Nurse Ratchet. And then when the doctor went over, he called him Mr. College Boy or something like that. And then I went over to tell him to settle down a little bit or whatever, and he said, you're nothing but a rent-a-cop. You're a rent-a-cop. You're a rent-a-cop, So, anyway, down at the main hospital, we actually had a police computer. I know that sounds weird. It sounded weird to me too when we got it, because I was a reserve officer, and we had to, not just a reserve, well, we had probably was reserve, maybe 1 or 2. We had to go through a thing required by, FBI or Department of Justice, I don't know, who, about the fact that, what the rules were on using the police computer. Like you're out there and you see some cute lady out there watering her lawn in a bikini or whatever, you can't run her tag or her address or anything to find, it's to be used for, and but anyway, looks like this is going to be a 2-hour video. So anyway, we had to take the thing, and then right after that, the hospital that I was working at, we got a police computer, and we could run people through the computer, run tags, run people, that type of stuff. But anyway, I was working out at the small hospital, small town, research building hospital, and this guy came in, drunk, and I wasn't upset or anything, but nobody was there. I mean, it was quiet. And I thought about running him through the computer down at the main hospital, but we hired in we had one or two female officers already, but we hired in this black female officer, and she worked midnights, and I worked there midnights until I went to, out there. And she spent all her time on the telephone in dispatch. When she was in dispatch for the 2 hours, she loved that because she could talk on the telephone to her boyfriend, who was a Kansas City, Missouri police officer and who was married. And then when she was on patrol outside, she would drive the patrol car up into a parking lot that was on the midnight shift with nobody up there. And then the Kansas City, Missouri police officer would come and park next to her. And I'd call down. I finally realized there was no point in calling down and asking her to run. She was supposed to run somebody for me, because she would say she'd give me some kind of a reason. Or even, I think she gave me, probably no wants or something like that. And I don't think she called because she wasn't taking time off from talking on the telephone, And then at another, I worked for a year at another hospital, and we had a microburst. That's, I think, the first time I really heard of microburst. And so I was working at this other hospital, and the rain was coming down like I'd never seen anything like it before. And then this husband came in just before midnight. His wife was a switchboard operator. And he came in and he said, "Have you seen the rain out there?" I said, "I just checked 5 or 10 minutes ago." He says, "You better check again." And I went, and the rain was going sideways. It was a microburst. The people that lived in the area, and people that had like houses, there was nice houses around there. And underneath, on the roofs or whatever, they have the vents, if you have an attic or something, so they can, let some of the humidity and the heat get out. And for a while, the Weather Bureau, when somebody says there's a tornado or whatever, they have to check to see if it really was a tornado. And they checked and said that was a microburst, and the people that lived there had some major damage to their homes. And they were saying, no, it was a tornado, it was a microburst. But I didn't know what a microburst, I'm not sure I'd even heard of it. Now, of course, we hear about it because of airports. It's really dangerous, it'd be very dangerous for an aircraft to land or maybe try to take off in a microburst, But anyway, I was working in this hospital, and I looked out, and rain was going like that. I had my ham radio with me, but I had the frequency for the main hospital security, and I had the frequency in there for the Raymore PD, and then I had that frequency in there for the Belton when I worked at Research Belton, we had we used our own radio. We were allowed to be on the police frequency with the Raymore, with the Belton PD. They were very nice about that. And it was a plus for them and a plus for us. But anyway, I'm working at this Lee Summit Hospital at a microburst, and I already had my radio because of the rain. I had my radio, my own personal radio, and I had it on the local police and fire department, and I heard on that frequency tornado watch for Eastern, I forget, doesn't matter, Eastern Lee Summit. And then I heard, I don't know whether it was a fire unit or a police unit, there's debris in the roadway. on the street. So I immediately, in fact, it was the guy that came in. His wife was a switchboard operator, so of course he walked over there, and then I walked over there, of course. And I told the switchboard operator to call the house supervisor, a nurse. It was a night, Call the house supervisor, tell her we need to go into code gray right now. And so she called up, and of course I was standing there, and then the house supervisor said, have Jim call the police department and ask what we should do. And then, of course, she could hear me, I told us, I said, tell her we need to go into code gray, we need to go in right now. And she said, okay, tell Jim to, or the switchboard operator, beep, 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 code gray, code gray, code gray. So I thought, okay, I better inform the main hospital because it's going to be on the news if a tornado hit. At that point, I thought it was a tornado, of course. I thought it's going to be on the news, and there'll be people, waking up to the news and be calling the main hospital to see if they should, if they should come in for, the disaster and that type of stuff. And so I called down, and of course that female security officer was in dispatch, and I said, we've had a tornado hit out here in Lee Summit. We haven't received any injuries or anything yet, but we've gone into code gray. I said, pass the information on to the security, supervisor, and pass the word on to the house supervisor there. And so we got a few people, very minor injuries, very minor. We got very few in. But about 45 minutes later, I heard on the radio down there, on my, because I could pick up, main research on the frequency, on the female security officer we had, real nice lady. She called in. She was listening to hillbilly music. What do we call it something else now. When I was a kid and my parents were taking me to bars and what have you, it was called hillbilly music. She called, and this is 45 minutes later. She called in and said, and I forget what the call sign was. She said, I was listening to, and it was, hillbilly music, not country music. That was it, yeah, country music. She said, such and such a station is saying that a tornado hit Lee Summit and that there are fires burning in parts of Lee Summit. Then I knew that female security officer in dispatch, she hadn't passed a word on. And then I heard later on that the people were waking up or whatever, and it was on the news, and of course there were no fires, Some houses were damaged pretty heavily. And the main thing I think was those vents underneath the roof. Water was going in, Normally water doesn't go in there, you have a little roof over it and water, but it was going sideways like a fire hose. But then I knew that the house supervisor at the main hospital, they were really busy, she's getting calls from department heads, the head of plant operations and these people and doctors and nurses calling, do I need to come in, And it would have been, so much better if people would listen to people sometimes. I never told him, but I'm going to tell you now. It doesn't matter. But when I got ordered to be working down, at the main hospital again, after 9 years of being at that small hospital, they switched every 2 hours. And there was 25 security officers total, not working each shift, there wasn't 25, but you know, except working midnights, we had, you know, almost nobody, you know, 3 or whatever, which you couldn't, you know, one had to be in the emergency room at all times. That was also our dispatch center. And the day shift would have, I don't know, 7 security officers or, you know, something. But, oh, okay, yeah. And when I started at Research Medical Center, the director of security was the worst director of security. He was unbelievable. I've mentioned that before, so I won't go through it again. He was unbelievable. He covered up stuff. He lied. He was just terrible. And when I hired in there, I think he made a mistake. Because he had talked, you know, when I was working at the hospital before I went to research, he called the director of security at Trinity, and they were talking about me. And the director of security at Trinity informed him that I had done 4 grievances on him, and that I won a couple. No, I did 4 grievances and I won all 4 of them. And I knew that, you know, there's no way this guy would have hired me. He must have had like an envelope in his drawer. He must have had, you know, a name of somebody who he could hire, and then somebody, my name, I'm sure, not to hire. He must have got the envelopes mixed up, because he hired me eventually. He had to beg me, and the chief of police of Raymore had to beg me, please, you know, I wouldn't answer the phone from the guy, and he kept calling on my answering machine. And then the real nice guy, the chief of police for Raymore, was a retired Kansas City, Missouri police officer. And the director of security at Research Medical Center had been many years ago, a Kansas City, Missouri police officer. And okay, I think I can end this 15 minutes early, because I forgot. Oh, no, that's what I was, way back when I was going to, okay, we had a police computer, and you know, we could run people there. Oh, I think I've got to go back again. The guy who came in and was drunk at Research Belton Hospital and called Nurse Ratchet, called, you know, Dr. So-and-so, college guy, whatever. You know, it was middle of the night, nobody was there except that patient. And I, jokingly, but not letting him know I was joking, which, not a good thing to do. Several times the director of security at Trinity, I really was, well, I confronted him when he was wrong. But I also sometimes joked with him, you know, and told him things. And then when he blew his stack and said, "You can just get out of the apartment," and whatever, you know, all this kind of stuff, then I doubled down. Then I didn't say, I was just teasing. You know, I didn't do that when he behaved that way. But I got sidetracked again. I'm going to end this. 1 hour and 45 minutes. I think that'll do it. Thank you very much.